All right, welcome back to Data Nerds. I am Mike Brown and only joined by one person today.
Pat Healy, baby, the duo.
Yeah, so we are. I guess Pat's going to be leading us through a interesting case that he has. So, Pat, all
Yeah,
yours.
give me the reins. So we're going to be looking at isometric knee extension, knee flexion testing results from a potentially undiagnosed meniscal lesion or tear. Um, and I got a little background on the case right here. So this is a 42-year-old active mom with a 5 and 7-year-old who predominant activity level includes a fitness class that she'll go to 3 to 4 times a week. It's not CrossFit, but kind of in the same realm where a lot of compound movements. They'll do some running, just really like a whole myriad of, like the box jumps and everything else. But she also will go for pretty long walks, like twice a week with her dog. But her biggest thing is just getting back to these fitness classes because, being like a mom and her job, she only works part-time at a school where her kid goes as a nurse. So this is like her one big like social interaction that she gets to do. So trying to keep her involved in that as best as we can. And so her initial injury was in February this year, where she said she was standing up from a bar stool at home where she landed on her rotated foot and felt a pop. She also believes that she was more prone to injury that night because she had a very heavy resistance day at the gym and just felt super sore and fatigued. Whether that be true or not, I don't know, but she finds that to be true. And then she stated that it did swell up significantly following the injury. And so I did not see her and evaluate her until late March, where she was still having feelings of fullness with full extension and trouble achieving terminal knee flexion. And then some of the like medial joint line tenderness, um, sensations of like popping and clicking, sometimes with ambulation or in deeper knee flexion angles. And so she was progressing well with activity modifications and isolated knee flexion and extension exposures. But then she went on vacation and was playing some tennis where she rolled her right ankle and then re-injured her left knee. I should have clarified this is for her left knee. And so when I saw her again, which was her fourth visit, she had significant, well, yeah, I would say like trace to 1+ swelling, limited range of motion, and sensitivity of symptoms again. So it was kind of like restarting the clock on this whole thing. Thankfully, she already had like a pretty good response after just like 2 sessions and being like younger and healthier. Symptoms were coming down pretty quick. But how does this play into, our testing? Where with her being very active and having a history in sports and such and wanting to get back to a higher activity level, I thought it would be important to do some isometric testing with her on our HUMEC norm. But I did not want to do it on the first session just because I do not enjoy pop quizzes. So I was anticipating testing her after 2 to 3 sessions, but obviously this was sidetracked due to this re-injury. Um, so I had to await when symptoms would stabilize again and she could handle loading of knee extension to at least a degree to where she can have some kind of output. When it comes to testing individuals, there's always that gray area of, all right, you could test it and it's going to be bad based on sensitivity, but do you still get the number or do you wait for symptoms to kind of like die down a little bit? I'm more in the opinion that I would like there to be some kind of tolerance to load before I test. With some individuals, there still might be some pain limitation, but most of that should be abolished by the time I do the test. If someone is doing strength training and they don't really have pain, but like with a maximal contraction, they have like mild pain with it, then I'm okay with that. But anything where it's like instantaneously painful, then I don't necessarily see the need for the tests in that regard. But back to the case. So I saw her on the 16th of April, and then I did not personally see her again until the 10th of May. And she only saw one of my coworkers in between, where they just continued doing the plan of care I had set out for her. So it was a long time, and I wanted to try to get a number. So when she came in this past weekend, I, you know, was going to judge it based on how she was presenting. And so when she returned, she said she was feeling 80% better, with the last 20% only being that she's still modifying her lifts, where she's kind of negating any knee dominant movement patterns. So she's replacing like heavy squats or lunges with like deadlifting and such. And she's not doing like box jumps. She'll just do like step ups and such. But then she also stated that she is fearful of re-injury. And so those are like if we're going to go simple math here, 10% and 10%. And so although I do not advise pop quiz style tests, I did feel it was appropriate based on this person's personality and her current symptom profile or sensitivity of symptoms. And what I mean by like patient personality is, she has a history in sports, in strength training, always came in and put 100% effort into everything, was very apparent, like that she was dedicated to the program. So when making this decision, I felt comfortable that she was going to give it her actual all, even though this was just kind of like thrown on her. And we've had discussions in the past how like I eventually want to do strength testing, but of course that was kind of sidetracked earlier on. And then I was never able to get a touch point for almost a month. But needless to say, her test came out pretty good. I would say,
Pat, before you go too far into that, can you just, for people that may not be familiar with the idea of like a pop quiz, like for a strength test, like, I mean, I think we all understand like what a pop quiz is, like,
oh, yeah,
but
right. Yeah, so like one example would be like you are doing an initial eval and you're like, all right, I want us to do some strength testing. And with this, you are going to give 100% exertion. And that's like one example of a pop quiz where the patient has no idea that they are coming to give 100%, almost like if you're going to it's equivalent to if you were going to ask someone to come in and do a 1 rep max, or like a 3 rep max. Um, that takes some mental preparation before doing. Much like if you think about any other like sporting event, like there's a huge component of mental preparation when trying to perform at your best. And so that rule still applies when it comes to our strength testing, to where I feel it is appropriate to give your patients at least one session in advance that this is going to come. um, I also think it's important to have the individual be put on the testing apparatus before doing the actual test, so it's not all foreign to them. And this patient has already been doing a lot of interventions on the HUMAC norm, where we might have done isometrics in the past on it, or we've done isotonic knee flexion on it. So she's already been in the chair. She knows what it feels like to be strapped in there. She understands what the feedback looks like on the screen. And so those were probably like the two biggest points of like, what do I mean by don't make this a pop quiz, is get familiarity with the testing equipment and get mental preparation through conversation about when you're going to do this, why you're going to do this, and how you're going to do this.
that makes sense. One other follow-up question to that. Do you see, or are you against pop quiz style tests for all testing, or is it because like the HUMAC is so different? Like, do you think a like a Tindeck, like an isometric with a Tindeck, you should have some time in advance, ideally?
Yeah, I would always prefer to have at least like a session before testing, even if it's utilization of like the Tendec. Like for a lot of my shoulder patients, if I know I want to do a seated 90-90 ER test, I will usually set them up in the same exact testing position for a training intervention the session prior to me potentially testing them, just so then they again like get familiar with the test setup, how the setup should feel like, because then I think that also saves a lot of time when you're working with the Tendec for working at the kinks of the position. That way, when you have them go into the actual test, it is very fluid for not only you but also for the patient. Because I think a lot of times when it comes to testing, we think a lot about ourselves, where we're really worried about how efficient can we be on the setup. But I think there's also something very important about how efficient does the patient feel on the setup, because much like a lot of other tasks, like the first time you do it is always going to be taking more mental energy and mental fatigue out of you to figure out what's the right way to do it. And I think that goes true also for like these strength tests, to where if the patient can understand like how to go through this and how to like what the setup should feel like, that way when you get to the actual test, it's a lot quicker and mentally easier for them to say like, yep, no, this does not feel the same, or yes, this does feel the same, and I'm good to go.
That's a great point. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Carry on.
Yeah. So for a pop quiz, I think this patient did very well. She is right side dominant, and like I said, she was a soccer player, so her right leg just naturally might have a little bit more gusto behind it. In the left side, with it being a 14% deficit, yes, I would say that I'd want to improve upon this and potentially build up her absolute value and relative. Looking at the force trace curve, I don't believe there's any inhibition going on, or if there is, it's very minor. So I do think this is just the case of weakness, which is, it's a good sign. Like it really lets me know that we can probably hammer a little bit more into like those knee dominant movement patterns again, and go a little bit harder on our knee extension exposures, since prior sessions we were limiting our knee exposures. And but what I mean by knee exposures is things that are knee dominant movements or positive knee excursion, which put a lot of strain through the knee. And we were really limiting it to like 2 to 3 exposures per session to try to mitigate any continual swelling or symptoms. But with her kind of stabilizing now and being pretty much pain free for like 2 weeks, I feel more comfortable going forward in that direction. And things that were very positives for takeaways from this test is, um, the patient had really good expression while executing this test. And I'll go into a little bit more what I mean by that on the next slide. And there was no immediate or latent symptom response from this test in terms of pain, which is also really good. And then also looking at hamstrings, I think relatively her hamstrings are doing pretty good. Like, obviously, I think, they could get a little bit better if we're trying to shoot for like that 60% mark. But I think for what she's trying to do, in her activity levels, this is pretty good.
Yeah. So, quick question on that. So, when you say 60%, that's like percent body weight. So, like for the hamstrings, that was 50 and 53
Mhm.
percent body weight, and so the goal is 60 there.
Yeah, usually I think that's like the marker we usually set out for our athletes. And so I think for her, I'm a little bit more lenient about saying, I'm not going to hold her back if she doesn't hit 60 just based on age, activity level, and everything else.
Yeah. And so then for quads, I think I know the answer, but I also am like, what's the percent body weight
Yeah.
that we're looking for there?
Yeah, with our athletes, it's been coming out that 100% body weight is like the minimal bar for entry. Um Like that is the standard, and it's not even like a standard to say that you're going to do good. It's kind of the standard to say like, okay, you can now begin these other things. It doesn't mean you'll be good at it, but we know you have enough knee extension torque that you aren't at a greater risk of re-injury. And I guess in the same light of the knee flexion torque, based on her activity level and her age and everything else, I'm okay with us not hitting 100% body weight. Like, of course, I'm going to shoot for as high as the number that I can get, but I'm also not going to hold her back from beginning future exercises. But I would like to see that left side get above like 85 at least, you know?
Yeah, that's
So,
fair. And it's always nice for her to know that like 100% is the goal, so you can like not keep moving the goalpost, but you're like there's something like hard that we need to achieve, and like both sides need to get better.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. And so interpretation, what do I mean by patient expression? When doing any kind of strength testing, it's important to not only look at quantitatively what is the value, but qualitatively, how is your patient or client demonstrating that value? And what I mean by that is there observable uh signs of hard activity? Like, is this hard for them? And usually the three things you'll see is like trophic changes of the skin, so like their face getting super red, verbal and physical signs of exertion, so whether it be grunting, some people hold their breath, some people make any kind of noises, and you should see like a overall tension kind of built up through the body. And this is super important because you will get people who will do this like all out test and kind of just look like, nothing's happening. Like they're just calm in the face. And it's really on us to try to give a lot of verbal instruction that, hey, this is supposed to be like very, very hard. Like this should be a maximal test. Like you shouldn't be relaxing. Um, and I think sadly there are just some people who don't necessarily want to put themselves in that position. Um, and so it is challenging, from a clinician perspective to where I think, Mike, where like maybe you work, I would imagine that the people are more up for actually giving full exertion because they want to see where they're at, like they're paying cash, and these are, runners that you're working with where I think, they're generally higher achieving individuals or trying to get back to higher level things, where I know on my end I've had some individuals who kind of just do PT so then they can go forth down the medical line because they don't think improving anything physical capacity wise is going to help their symptoms, and so they just kind of half-ass the test, and no matter how much I try to explain it to them, it's still kind of like a half-assed test. And so, thankfully, in this situation, that was not the case. And especially for being a pop quiz kind of test, I was very proud to see that she was very much game to doing it through all these signs. And like I said, she had no pain during the test or immediately following. I'm gonna have to follow up with her to say, like, did you have pain the next day? I would assume some soreness, but like, was it overtly swollen and such? And then at the bottom, I just say that, she was right leg dominant. So, just account that there might be some minor differences in those outputs. And so, what exactly is next? So, what I talked with her is, let's keep up with some isolated knee extension, knee flexion work through like single leg variations at the gym or on her own. She doesn't have access to like a standard gym with like, the machines. So, we have to do a lot of closed chain variants, but, gotta do what you gotta do. And then resumption of knee dominant movement patterns in the gym to tolerance. And then our next step would to begin a plyometric preparatory block with a controlled positive shin angle and rotation. And what I mean by that is how I usually do like a plyo prep block is isolating out some concentric and eccentric portions to common plyometric movements. So, starting from a box and focusing only on the concentric part by rocking forward and jumping up onto another box. And then pairing that with just doing some snap downs or step offs. That way you're dichotomizing that plyometric and not putting so much force by just going straight into a plyo. and then controlled positive shin angle and rotation. So with her not having any pain anymore, I would like to get her in some knee dominant positive shin angle or positive knee excursion movements, and then start to supplement some rotation also, whether that be just simply like taking some walks and rotating with a med ball, just to cognitively get that idea of like we can plant and have rotation at the trunk. And then just progress that from our control to a little bit more like chaotic scenarios. That way we kind of get over this fear of re-injury in our controlled environment before she starts doing some higher level stuff, especially since she has two kids who are pretty young. It's like they're going to be wanting to do a whole lot with their mom. And so
They're going to be agents of chaos.
yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the plan we have right now, and I feel pretty confident on it. And she also, seems very bought in, and yeah, I don't know necessarily how long it'll take, but if symptoms continue to improve, I wouldn't be shocked if this could be done in the next like 8 weeks. So
Sweet. That's pretty nice. Just how like I guess relatively quick she's bounced back from this. And I can't remember if you said anything. Has she had any flare ups too?
outside of the vacation
tennis.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, outside of the vacation, no, because it was the initial injury, and then a month after the initial injury I saw her, and then it was like 3 weeks after that she wanted this vacation, but then that vacation was beginning of April, and now it's middle of May, and she's hasn't had any problems,
Nice.
and is doing a lot better. So
Nice. That's a non-op meniscus. I feel like can be like variable, at least in the people that I've seen. Maybe it's just because they're trying to get back to a lot of running. Is sometimes it can like swell up a lot for people, and like they just kind of can't get past this. Can't get past like a certain threshold. Like usually, like I'm thinking of one person in particular. Like it was like 30 minutes. He couldn't run more than 30 minutes until it started to hurt and swell.
have you thought about just improving his knee extension? Just kidding. I'm just messing.
Yeah, I mean, he eventually like we tried like 2 or 3 times, and then we were like, all right, he got a meniscectomy, and now I think he's been running 30 minutes. So next time I see him, I'm gonna be like, how did it go? Hopefully, we've broken through the barrier.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So we'll see. I would assume that she'll probably have like 1 or 2 flare ups, but fingers crossed she doesn't. But if it happens, she has shown like good control of symptoms and has a good idea about modifications now. So has been able to rebound pretty quickly. So I think, um, you know, anticipate flare ups, but right now we're smooth sailing.
Nice. Yeah. Well,
Any other
cool.
questions?
I don't know. I feel like you went over all the things that I would have questions about. So that just felt very thorough to me. So
Sick. Sweet.
um cool. So if you don't have anything else, I think that's a little shorter episode.
But
Um
no, I got nothing. Oh, I guess, well, if anyone's listening this far, I guess, I don't know. Didn't really explain what the test was, did I? Kind of just said isometric test. I guess I probably should have explained that.
I mean, it was isometric and a humac, so I feel like explain it, and then if someone's really curious and they're like, what happened, then we just
You know what? You know what? They
we
can
just
just go see
send them through
episode
this.
1. Just go watch episode 1. Just go watch episode 1, and that'll tell you everything that I did. It's the
There.
same protocol.
Nice. Nice. Cool. So that has been another episode of Data Nerds. If you have enjoyed this far, and you're still listening after that, please consider leaving a like, because this is going to go on YouTube. So leaving a like on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, like we always like a nice review there, and follow us on Instagram at Reading Rehab Pod. Thanks.